Welcome to Mind the Gap, the Disruptors Co-webinar series connecting the big transformational themes of our times with public service innovation and thought leadership. Today, we are joined by sustainability strategist Tim Prosser, my co-CEO and Disruptors Co, Joanne Jacobs. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting and recording this meeting from the lands of the Darug people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the land and waters of Australia. So once again, welcome to Tim and Joanne. Let's kick off with a thought-provoking video from the UK's Digital Sustainability Alliance that Tim shared with us. Just going to swap over and let you watch this because it is quite fascinating.
We live in a world connected by technology, with the number of devices relentlessly increasing and a growing digital landscape. But at what cost to the planet? The impact of digital is hidden. When we watch a video or use an app, it's not just the energy powering our devices that needs to be sustainable, but also the complex physical infrastructure behind the scenes. We need to consider the full impact of technology and examine its relationship with our planet. Minerals and metals are essential components in our devices and digital infrastructure. A smartphone can contain over 20 different metals alone. Many of these rare earth elements are finite, and some are predicted to run out in the next 5 to 10 years. They are often found in politically unstable geographies and conflict zones. It's not just the supply of these metals that is at risk. Mining significantly impacts biodiversity, with forest ecosystems destroyed. Communities suffer poor health outcomes from air pollution, while toxins from metal extraction seep into rivers and soil. Although some metals are abundant, significant quantities of energy and water are still required to extract and process them. Even after production and shipping, powering technology has an impact on the planet. Data centers use billions of liters of water for cooling. And when it's time to upgrade, what happens to the old tech? It's almost impossible to imagine the scale of the 53.6 million tons of e-waste generated worldwide in 2019 alone. Only a fraction of this e-waste is recycled. The rest is sent to landfill or incinerated, where harmful toxins contaminate water sources, soil, and air. Acid baths and open-air burning used to recover valuable materials can also expose workers to dangerous chemicals. So, what can we do? The tech industry has a critical role to play in leading towards a more sustainable future. We can significantly reduce pollution, deforestation, and water use throughout the entire life cycle of our products and services, applying our skills and technology to understand our impact on the planet and reconnect with nature. The Government Digital Sustainability Alliance, GDSA, is a collaboration across the tech industry to create a sustainable digital future for the UK government and its suppliers, using our collective knowledge and digital capability. Only together can we help secure and restore our natural capital, fight climate change, and increase global biodiversity.
Amazing. Super interesting way to start this webinar, Tim. And thanks for sending that through. Can you give us a bit of a perspective on why you think some of those themes are important?
Can you hear us, Tim?
I think we've lost Gavin, Joe.
Oh,
I think we've lost you, Tim. Are you there, Tim?
That's it.
No.
I'm here.
Great.
Yep.
So I was just saying it's a great way to start this webinar, and very interesting topic and range of topics that they've brought together there. Can you give us a perspective, or your perspective, on why it's important also here in Australia?
Tim, are you with us? Should I have a go, Gavin, and then we can actually see whether or not we can get Tim back? Look, I mean, I think at the moment where we are in Australia when it comes to AI and sustainability is that there's lots of people who are doing some interesting things in terms of getting ready for AI, but I don't think people really are yet at the point where they're considering the impact of what they're doing. And it is extraordinary how much energy and how much power is taken up, even with a really simple token-based search on either a ChatGPT or a Claude or a Copilot or whatever happens to be out there. So we are not really understanding the impact already of what we're doing, and we're not actually understanding what is actually needed to be able to change our processes. There you go. Tim's dropped off, unfortunately. He'll come back. I promise he will come back. But hey, Bella, hey, Sue. Nice to see you in the audience there. But yeah, I don't think people are really understanding yet what the actual impact is of use of AI in any kind of context, whether that's corporate or in government. And really the amount of power that is being used, even with really simple uses of AI, is profound.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what really struck me with that video was the connection between the visible and the invisible. So, a lot of the work that we're doing in the technology or with AI, or with AI in the background where we don't even know that AI is being used or taking place in various different business processes, that there are scope emissions that are taking place, even as we're just using this for things like taking photos of myself, or updating a photo, or changing, writing some content, or whatever it happens to be. Even the smallest pieces of content or use cases around AI are having that impact, and it's going through invisibly to our data centers, requiring power, requiring water, requiring a whole lot of different activity to take place, and that's exposing us to a lot of emissions and challenges that are being pushed down further.
Tim has rejoined us. He's coming back on screen. Hey, Tim, when he gets here. Hello. Are you there, Tim? I think Tim may have.
I'm sorry. I got kicked out.
You didn't get kicked out, my dear. You actually ended up not answering our questions. So we did finish watching that video. We did actually start talking about that video and what impact it's having. What was your feedback on the video itself?
It's a video that's been around for about 12 months. It's obviously come from the UK. The UK government are being very progressive in its ambition around digital sustainability, and that caught my attention. My takeouts were how broad and pervasive the issues are, and deeply ingrained in supply chains for everyone, whether you're an individual, an organisation, or a government. So that was probably my takeouts from that video.
Cool. And what do you think it means for Australia? Because we were just talking about the whole. I love the fact that this is being led out of the UK, and that they're pulling together organisations across government. There's some processes in place. There's some committee meetings taking place. There are some guidelines being developed, and so on. Are you seeing that sort of thing happening here as yet, or are we way behind the people?
There's probably two answers to that question, Gavin. Regulation-wise, Australia is actually slightly ahead of the UK, but as far as organisational and societal uptake of digital sustainability, we're probably behind. You might be aware that in the late 2000s, the UK government legislated probably one of the first and one of the most ambitious climate legislations globally, and I think it was 2008-9, and that ingrained in law the need to work towards a lower emission economy. So that's way ahead of Australia. We don't yet have that here. However, last January 2025, the Federal Treasury have launched the mandatory disclosures. So there are 6,000 organisations now directly caught up in that requirement to report. Initially, your operational emissions from you as an organisation, but more broadly, that'll bring in supply chains both up and downstream over time. But that isn't really a reason to not engage with this if you're not in those 6,000 reporting organisations, because if you're a supplier to any organisation above 100 people, you will be, by implication, be caught in this as well. So there are probably very few organisations that will not be directly or indirectly caught up in the regulation.
Interesting, and I guess that is where people are wanting to know how they can be involved and what is required. So I think what was interesting from my perspective also, watching the video, was the connection between IT technology and sustainability, and the fact that they are becoming much more interlinked. So we used to sort of easily just think that ICT was sitting over in the corner and that it would be doing its own thing, and that the CIO or the Chief Technology Officer would drive that as an organization. But we need to have this more nuanced conversation now, with cloud, software, data centers all sort of contributing to the scope 2 and 3 emissions. Is that the sort of, is that what you're seeing as well? Is this the sort of work that you've been working with organizations to understand?
The way I start off those kind of engagements or those questions, Gavin, is I try to personally, last year did some research around individual emissions as a person. Think of everyone's or your individual consumption of technology. Think of photos on your iPhone, think of videos, think of emails, think of streaming, the very digital lives we live these days. And Australia is very uniquely positioned because of our geographic isolation and the size of the continent, and our relative speed in the uptake of technology. We're actually quite a high technology society globally. And when you look at a per GDP emissions profile, we're actually pretty high as well because of that. Going back to that nature research, which I'll post the link in the chat shortly, it identified for an individual that makes a personal commitment to a 1.5 degrees Paris commitment as an individual, 40% of your carbon budget as an individual is taken up by your digital existence, your digital exhaust, if you will, which includes cloud computing, it includes data centers, it includes email, it includes streaming, it includes meetings like this. We have a lot of, our lives transcend the technology infrastructure. The challenge we have from a societal point of view is it's not really front of mind. A lot of this infrastructure is buried deep in the guts of buildings or data centers or the ether, the cloud even, and not necessarily very transparent. So try and put some numbers on that for the audience. We have operationally about 200 data centers in Australia. These are hyperscale, large buildings, usually hidden away. They're pretty nondescript. There's probably 5 people working in them. And an individual data center on the low level can consume about the equivalent of 50,000 homes worth of power and water. So extrapolating that figure across Australia nationally, that's a figure of 10 million homes in power and water in just that data center infrastructure alone. What's a little bit more troubling now, and maybe we'll get into the AI arms race as well in this conversation, but we're projected to build out another 175 data centers in the next 5 years in Australia, which is another 8 million homes of power and water in Australia. So we ought to be having a more nuanced conversation around, hang on a minute, we have a population equivalent here of 18 million homes of power and water consumption on a dry continent on a very renewable focused, and we don't have that many homes. So I'm trying to raise the profile of the conversation. I'm not trying to say data centers are bad, because they're not. They're good. They enable our digital lives and support a number of things we do. However, we're a pretty dry continent. We do have some challenges around the build out of renewable energy and its transmission to the use where it's used in the country. So we do need to have a conversation around that nationally.
Very interesting. Before we sort of dive into too much detail, maybe we could take a step back and you could talk us through the difference between Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions. So just throwing that out there before.
Yeah, so in just looking at from the regulations point of view at the moment, what is required as of this year for Group 1 is Scope 1 and 2 emissions only. So Scope 1, if you imagine you as an organisation, your buildings, your activity in that infrastructure, and then any consumed or purchased power or steam or things you buy from utilities is Scope 2. So for many organisations, and most organisations, their emissions profile in Scope 1 and 2 alone is actually quite low. I'm talking 5-10% of overall emissions when you look at the broader spectrum. The lion's share of emissions for large non-polluting organisations are in Scope 3, so supply chains, vendors, all of that. So at the moment, a lot of the reporting regime, which up until now has predominantly been voluntary from organisations and government, it's based on things you think are material and therefore things you need to report on. So a lot of it is very electricity consumption, water consumption, building use, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that there is a massive amount of work coming when we do get into Scope 3. So a lot of the work I'm doing at the moment is to try and engage with teams to build up this capability in anticipation of the regulation. So for Group 1 entities in the mandatory disclosures, for example, they're going to need to report Scope 3 emissions within the next 2 to 3 years.
Right. And what do you think that looks like? Are we talking about new ways of thinking, new accounting systems, new ways of measuring our technology and its uses? What goes into this mix?
All of the above, Gavin. So the regulation, because it comes from the Federal Treasury, is landing on the desk and the responsibility of the CFO. The CFO historically has had a very close alignment with the IT function, which is a good thing. So it means that the IT capability is usually going to get involved in that. Historically, a vast simplification, but sustainability has been the domain of environmental science, corporate affairs, or marketing communications, possibly the worst place, because marketing communications is not necessarily going to affect and sponsor the transition. We actually need strategic engagement, we need resources, we need capability. But what's really exciting is this new mindset is opening up a whole raft of new opportunities. And I'm seeing case studies now of 3 to 6% top line revenue growth because of problem areas that have surfaced through sustainability lens and have been able to be worked on and incorporated in a strategy. And maybe has affected the business strategy in a totally different area. You've ceased doing some things and started something else. Another area that's emerging in the kind of employee base, and this is a study that was done last year by the Climate Action Tech Community, which is a non-profit, 10,000 members globally. They had about 6,000 respondents in this survey, and they looked at the binary choice between KPIs or motivations, cost-based measures versus sustainability-based incentives. And they found staff are more willing to engage in purpose, impact-led work than they are around cost-based measures. So the numbers came out something like 16% only of employees were interested in cost-based measures. Somebody else, after all, gets the benefit, not them directly. Whereas a sustainability, purpose-aligned impact kind of work, engaged 56% of those respondents. A more recent survey apparently has improved those numbers. So in just the tech community alone, of which there are 900,000 practitioners in Australia, soon to be 1 million by 2030, we have an untapped resource there by engaging them in these sustainable, purpose-led impact kind of work in order to work on solutions and help solve some of these problems just by engaging them. This is not simply a compliance reporting piece of work. That should be the output or a byproduct of just engaging in this strategically. So, yeah.
Very cool. I really do like the way that you're framing that that idea of the sustainability piece, the reporting piece becomes part of your ongoing business strategy. It requires the change management around that. It requires integration into that business strategy, into your engagement, employee engagement strategy, maybe even into your talent strategy as well, and obviously into your technology strategy. Joe, is this the sort of thing that that we can sort of see coming through from conversations with employees, with business boards that are trying to start to move their business towards these spaces, or is there not a good sense of connection yet?
I think impact is something that is increasingly interesting, in regardless of whether it's a corporate entity or whether it's a government entity. I think there's certainly interest in being motivated by doing something more than making money in business. I think that's certainly true. I think, but we are, though, living through, because this is about AI in many respects. It is this sort of this conflict between doing something for purpose and then potentially doing a whole lot of people out of their jobs and using a lot more energy in order to be able to do the same work that you were doing before. So there's this sort of conflict between wanting to do something for purpose and then not actually being given the opportunity to do so because there's been so much of a downsizing. I mean, we've seen a lot of companies just in the last couple of weeks announce a whole bunch of new redundancies very specifically because they are removing people from roles that were normally conducted by humans, and now they're actually going to be conducted by AI. So the big question, I've just been looking at some numbers after Tim was throwing some numbers around, and the average by 2027 data centers could account for 0.5% of global electricity use. I mean, if we are all using data centers for AI to do the job, then even if we are, as humans, wanting to be much more for purpose individuals, we are not actually necessarily creating a corporate or governing environment where that's actually even possible.
Interesting. And I guess it's particularly interesting at the moment because we've got this big push on productivity, and a lot of people are turning their lens around productivity to AI and automation and so on. So there's an increased amount of focus on that, as the video makes clear, and as Tim was sort of saying, this has sustainability impacts that are going to come back to us, and increasingly we're going to have to report on those things, and it's going to be interesting to start seeing what that means as people start to tell their story. So it probably comes up to this next question I have around greenwashing, and I know that Tim's been pretty vocal about this idea of greenwashing and what brands, businesses, government organizations are doing around sustainability reporting, and what greenwashing is doing to muddy the waters, or green the waters, shall we say?
Yeah, so the Australian or the ACCC have been very active, and they've actually had something like 47 please explains to organisations in Australia, predominantly in financial services, superannuation, and so on, around marketing campaigns that don't match actual reality. 3 of those have actually ended up in the High Court and ended up in multi-million-dollar fines. So what this is now bringing about is a certain amount of nervousness about leaning into the kind of green transition. And as a result, it's giving rise to kind of the green hushing phenomenon where people are choosing not to say anything. And also the American administration as well is kind of having a similar kind of effect. But a lot of the data I'm reading at the moment is suggesting people are just getting on with this. They're not ripping these kind of ESG or sustainability or climate transitions out of their strategy because they do see the need, they do see the opportunity. So that's really kind of quite comforting. What I would say, though, is from a board level governance point of view, there is a real shift in the mindset around purely financial metrics and historical financial measure reporting and the governance associated with that, which everyone's pretty familiar with in that community, versus very immature metrics over a much longer term around emissions calculations going forward 10, 15, 20 years in the future. The litigation exposure around that space is pretty live and pretty real. For example, the AICD, Australian Institute of Company Directors, are hosting a forum on Friday around this exact issue. Probably 1,500, 2,000 board directors in the room. A lot of talk about litigation and risk and how that community manage that risk down.
Right. And I'm sure that's going to be an interesting conversation. And even just in the scale of that, right? So 1,500 board directors gathering in one place to learn about this. Obviously, this is a hot topic, and we're seeing a level of engagement from boards rather than executive management. So is that because the responsibilities shift to the board at a strategy level, or is it that do you have a sense that the executives are already across it, or are we having a situation where there's a gap between the two?
Bit of all of the above. Boards are certainly across this. This is the 4th convening of the Climate Governance Forum of the AICD. And they are liable. So there is a moratorium for 3 years, but once that's worn off, the ACCC and ASIG have made it very clear they're coming. And you look at the international, the ICJ announcement from the Vanuatu case just last week. That's given people, the legal community, a very increased focus and confidence around the litigation opportunity, let's say, around this space. What many don't appreciate is Australia is amongst one of the most litigious jurisdictions in the world for climate legislation. That's a Bloomberg NEF reference. They've made that clear in their reports every year. So these cases happen, and we're unaware of them, and they're not newsworthy, so they don't surface many of them, but they're going on, which is possibly why some of the board community are so nervous about this risk, specifically in Australia.
Right, interesting. I mean, I guess that's bringing us into that sense of what does leadership look like now then? If we've got a cultural shift underway, we've got operational shifts underway for government organizations, for public sector, for private sector, and it's coming for SMEs as well. I can see coming down the track further into the future. What does this mean for leadership? What does it mean for people who are setting that agenda for organizations and their people and their cultures and their customers?
Well, I think the word that immediately springs to mind, Gavin, is authenticity and ambition and words like that. So I think staff, stakeholders, shareholders, citizens can see through messaging if it's not authentic. But we're also looking for a degree of ambition around recognition of the challenges we have around climate specifically. Over 80% of the population, some say as high as 85%, are actually concerned and wanting to do more, although they don't necessarily know how, or they're just busy running their lives to accommodate any other adjustments. So the vast majority of the population are wanting to do things, but we need, from a policy, maybe a regulation or a framework point of view, being able to support that. And I think the other key takeaway really is this is not a journey we're going to do in isolation on our own. Collaboration is the key word up and down supply chains. This is an opportunity really to partner with competitors, partner with people you wouldn't ordinarily connect with. So I'm seeing many organizations leaning into their supply chains, both up and downstream, in order to collaborate and share some of the problem and sometimes the cost around how to resolve some of these issues. Some of the more frustrating challenges and opportunities, about 70% of climate solutions already exist. We just need to adopt them. So this isn't necessarily about new innovation and new ideas. This is just getting on with things we already know we need to do. So that's probably low-hanging fruit, if you can call it that.
Again, it comes back to that change management piece, right? So being able to set an agenda, follow it through, and drive that adoption, whether it's internally, whether it's externally, or across your supply chain, is going to be key. But it probably means that we need to develop better skills, either in communications or in collaboration, and cross-organizational collaboration, especially, I'm guessing. Is that something that you think is a new superpower, Joanne?
Skills development, yeah. I mean, but coming back to what Tim's just been saying then about some of these solutions are not really, they're just there, they haven't been adopted. My question to Tim was going to be, why haven't they been adopted yet? Is it literally because people don't have the skills that they need to be able to adopt it, or is it because of the fact that they've just been a pre-existing investment in the current way of doing things, and therefore there is no incentive to change? And if skills development is a problem or is needed, what kind of skills are needed? Tim?
Again, probably all of the above, Jo. Skills is certainly a conversation thread that comes up a lot. There's also a degree of confidence, and we are breaking away from in many cases, a business model that has suited us up until now, and it's been quite inconvenient. But there are many cases where we need to break away from that, and that requires a degree of leadership, a degree of ambition, confidence, and other things as well. So it's a combination of regulation, policy, leadership, governance. We're in a very interesting situation. I've just returned to Australia from a bit of a research trip in the UK, specifically around climate, digital sustainability, and those kind of things. What was really kind of exciting in leaving many of those conversations, the focus on Australia is about to get absolutely, we're going to get a big focus in 2026. Adelaide is currently in the final stages of bidding or hosting the Conference of Parties for 2026, November. That is a global stage of 40 to 50,000 delegates, a collective wallet spend of $500 million. Just the numbers are absolutely astonishing. And this is in partnership with the Pacific Islands, don't forget. And it's going to be hosted in Brazil this November 2025. So there's a real opportunity to build some kind of community, some kind of narrative from Brazil across the Pacific to Australia, to Adelaide. And it really presents Australia with a very unique opportunity in the months year leading up to that event, if it is confirmed, either September to November this year, we'll know. The word on the street is Australia is really got a nose ahead against Turkey, the other remaining bidder, which is known to be quite political in the way that it stays in the bidding competition to get some concessions politically. It did exactly the same thing with the Glasgow COP, apparently, so we can expect that. So someone like the Federal Minister for Energy and Climate, Chris Bowen, will be the president of the COP if that's confirmed. And I'm already seeing activity supporting the backfill and the support around that. Australia has a very unique global opportunity. It's kind of the Olympics, to use a sporting analogy of the climate world.
Yeah.
Not only to set some leadership and some policy guidance. South Australia, hopefully by then, will be 100% net renewable as a state, which is a global first in a gigawatt scale. And Tasmania is pretty much already up there. So there's some amazing stories that Australia can use as case studies to the world.
So that's actually answering that question. What does good leadership look like in managing this? It's about setting some of those agendas, I guess, and following through on the delivery.
And it's,
Cool.
you know, with from a sports, I like the idea of the sports sports perspective, because we've known from previous kinds of instances of, you know, whether it's a World Cup being hosted here, or an Olympics being hosted here, or a Commonwealth Games almost being hosted here, that it does tend to focus people's attention. I guess the next question, though, then comes down to, if there's so much focus on Australia with that kind of an event, do you see that as being, you know, an impetus for change, or is it going to, you know, put us on the world stage as potential not pulling our weight?
I'm nervous, Joe. I'm nervous. So I think that the truth in the answer there is really going to be, do we have a whole of government leadership? Are they leaning into this? At the moment, our Prime Minister is not leaning into this. It's purely an energy and climate minister-led initiative. So it's kind of down the tree. We'll see in the next few months whether, if the Prime Minister does have a whole of government lean into it, we know it's going to be up for the win. Otherwise, it's going to be in the department, and that's probably not where it should be.
Right.
Ooh, interesting times ahead. So we've reached just over the half-hour point. So I'd like to turn it over to a couple of questions we've got coming through. And if anyone in the audience would like to ask Tim a question, by all means, drop those into the comments. That would be great. And there is one question, Tim, which you did sort of address before, which was that you will share some links into the chats, into the LinkedIn Live comment feed later. But one of the questions is around the reports you're mentioning and case studies. Is there a place where we can find some of this information, or is it scattered across the web like most other things?
It's in my head.
You need to get it out somewhere.
A bit of a personal reflection. So there's certainly a couple of blogs I've been writing, a number of webinars or podcasts I've been doing. So I've kind of been working in the digital transformation space for 20 years. More recently, in the last 2 years, I've been focusing on climate technologies and digital sustainability. And much of what I've learned has purely been through growth mindset and curiosity. There isn't necessarily a handbook for a lot of this stuff. A lot of it is being developed as we go. That sounds a little bit flimsy, I'm certainly very happy to drop a number of the resources and references I've mentioned in the LinkedIn Live chat offline shortly.
Brilliant. We'll
Cool.
grab some of those and put those up into our newsletter, or into a blog post at some stage as well, because it'll be sensational resources for people to be able to follow through and learn for themselves, do their own research in a way, and find out what's going on in the sustainability space. Great. Any other questions or any other thing that you'd like to share with us, Tim, before we look to wrap up in about another 5 minutes or so?
I think we briefly touched on AI. Joe mentioned it earlier. It's a conversation that's drowning out a lot of this world. There are some very good opportunities in the use and the uptake of AI to help us solve some of these sustainability challenges. A lot of this reporting does require a lot of data, and AI is great at that kind of space. But the flip side of that is really coming with a significant cost. For example, many of the large hyperscalers are reporting for the last couple of years they're way off their sustainability objectives for 2030. And we do need to, as customers of big technology companies, we need to drive some accountability, but it means we need to lift our capability and our knowledge to be able to ask those pointy questions and not just blindly accept marketing collateral that's presented to you. I see a huge risk in the entities that have to report around emissions, that their data is just being ingested, unquestioned, unchallenged. Case studies that I'm aware of in the UK, they're finding a 99% variance, 99% variance between reported and actual emissions when they do a verification true-up. So that is just setting the scene for a pretty challenging litigation future if we're not careful. So it does mean you really do need to own the data that you're ingesting. You need to understand it. You need to make assumptions. You won't get it right, first off. No one ever will, because this is a vast challenge. I've heard leaders refer to this as the biggest transformation they've seen in business and government in the 40 years they've been practicing. And those are very significant ASX names that people will be familiar with making those statements. So this is not an individual activity. This is a whole of team effort to get behind it and work out how you can contribute towards the solution.
Yeah, fascinating. As you were speaking, I was just thinking one of the challenges we face is that we're relying as individual users or company users. We are relying on the technology providers we use, Microsoft's, the Googles, and so on, to be doing this work behind the scenes in order for us to feel comfortable that is taking place. But it's like multiple lengths of arms away from where we actually need to be understanding the impacts. So while yes, I can see that that there might be a statement from Microsoft, but it feels like, as an example, but if it's coming from Microsoft, it feels like it's a discussion about something else rather than the work that I do with their products.
Right.
So, I think there's some work to be done on linking our uses, our use cases, and our sense of personal responsibility and corporate responsibility back into the technologies that we're choosing and using.
Yeah, so one of the blog posts I will post is 15 questions as a board needs to ask its IT team, and then 10 questions you as a technology team need to be asking your technology vendors. They're very different audiences. One obviously is around board governance and risk, and the other group is much more engineering focused. We need to align those kind of conversations to make sure that people are alive to the exposures or the risks or the challenges here. But there is massive opportunity and upside. So yeah.
I have one last question from Ballina. Tim, if you could have a look at that on the screen.
Okay, so hello, Ballina. So the case we're referring to is there from Vanuatu, and that's a fantastic case study to look at. It was actually a bunch of university students in 2009 that convened in order to work out how they get direction around protection of Pacific Islanders who are in the absolute crosshairs of climate change, and they're losing their lands to that at the moment. I think we actually saw Tuvalu citizens last week opening up citizenship opportunities to Australia, and a third of the population enrolled to it. So massive numbers already caught out. We need to make sure, well, and there are other legal case studies that were handed down in favour of the federal government in Australia 3 weeks prior to that, and apparently that's going to be put back to appeal based on the ICJ case last week. So there's a lot more to play out in this space. That ICJ case last week has given a lot of increased confidence in the kind of climate litigation space. So I think we're going to see a lot more activity. So those that are heads in the sand, traditionalists not wanting to budge, are going to find it a little bit tricky in the next few years. They're going to be spending most of their money and their time in court if they're not careful.
Interesting. As you said before, this is emerging spaces, and we're making it up as we go. But we have some of the best minds in the world now tackling these challenges for us. So while I'm saying that we're making it up as we go, we've actually got some really great people, great processes, great organisations, and technologies now coming in to play a very serious role in all this. So it's not like it's a free for all.
I think there's quite a different mindset we need to adopt in being open to some of the challenges and opportunities here, Gavin. I was very fortunate to be part of the curatorial team for Climate Action Week Sydney here in March, and we convened 2 days, Solutions House and Future Generations Day. And that really gave us an opportunity to help curate and provide platforms for voices or communities that hadn't traditionally had that opportunity to convene space for about 2,500 people. And really, I was using the science as serendipity, and there is, believe it or not, science around how you can convene and facilitate a space to increase the surface area for luck to strike and for collisions and conversations of people that wouldn't naturally, ordinarily come together, and they can share the collective problem around climate. I'll share that blog post in the LinkedIn chat as well, so people can look at that if they're interested.
Brilliant. Well, that's been fascinating, I must admit. I loved it when you sent through the video, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. So thanks again, Tim. It's been awesome having you on. Like I said earlier, we'll be sharing some of those links back into the LinkedIn Live session. We'll pull some of these insights together, bring us back into a newsletter and into an update on our website to give you a bit more of a capture of what's been going on here during this discussion. I would like to thank everyone for joining us so far, and whether you are live on the stream or whether you are watching this in replay, we're always interested in your feedback, so by all means do drop some of that feedback into the comments, send us an email. We're really happy to have that feedback from you. Again, thank you again, Tim and Joanne. Thank you for participating, and we will see you next time on Disruptors Co.'s Mind the Gap webinar series. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Gavin.